So let's say a standard guitar isn't quite enough for you. The E to E just doesn't offer enough low end. You want that low B or even a low A, who knows? There are really two ways of doing that. You can get a baritone guitar, like I have here, or you can get a 7-string guitar. Or I guess you could just try to turn a standard guitar into a baritone guitar, but the effects of that can be, a little bit varied. Well, today Andy and I are going to compete at some level. Andy's going to be team 7-string, I'll be team baritone. We're going to talk about the design differences of each of these different guitars, talk about the advantages that they offer and the disadvantages, because I think both of them have a little bit of both of those things. You know what I mean? So Andy's got this Jackson 7-string we keep around the office, which is frankly not the world's finest guitar, but it looks pretty good in your hands. And I have this Supro baritone. Andy actually was at Supro when these came out.
Helped design it.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I really love this guitar. I like it more than that one, which is why I am team baritone. But to start off, both of these guitars, as you can imagine, give us the low B. Let's. You've already got that Jennier sound on that one. I feel like that may be owed to the not Supro pickups.
Yeah,
the
Roadhouse pickups in that definitely have a more open single coil thing, and these are a little.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, these are meaty. Both sound good. It's just whether you want that kind of cutting, bitey thing, which you could do on here, I suppose, too.
Well, it's interesting because it seems to be the ethos of a baritone versus the ethos when going to designing a 7-string is so different. I'd say it's a lot harder to find a 7-string with good single coils than a baritone with good humbuckers.
Because, when people are making baritone guitars, I'm sure they have, some people wanting to do like Josh Homme, Queens of the Stone Age stuff in mind, but also they have people that are trying to do that old country guitar baritone thing in mind, where I don't think Jackson is making this with the idea of playing old RCA Studio B sounds at all.
Yeah, I don't think the Faceless is going for that.
So at one level, I think that I hadn't even thought of bringing this up, but it does seem like on the whole, 7-string guitars are more quickly and readily designed for modern metal, if that's what you're trying to do with them, than baritone guitars are. From the pickups to just like the actual design. I mean, this is designed like a big 6-string guitar that you could just strum if you wanted to. Yeah. That does not feel like how that guitar is designed at all.
No, I feel like I gotta do a lot more than just play my riffs.
Yeah, for sure. So covering the design differences, certainly pickups, and obviously that can vary. You could do either one in either way, depending. I could pop some EMGs in here but I would never do that. But another big one, of course, is scale length. So this is, I believe, a 27-inch scale.
Yeah, 27.
You'd know better than I guess. You were there. And you will see baritone guitars that even exist as long as 30 inches in some of the Squier ones. Whereas with a 7-string guitar, it's a little bit different. I should let you talk about that.
Yeah, this is a 26 and a half, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find a fan fret baritone, which is when the scale of the guitar is different for each string, and this allows for a more in tune string. This is why we make longer instruments. There are a lot of fan fret 7-strings, but there are not a lot of fan fret baritones, and I feel like that again the marketing and the ethos behind what a 7-string is supposed to be versus that of a baritone.
Well, and we should talk about that too. The reason for fanning those frets is because on a 7-string, you still have a regular guitar up on the high 6 strings. And so you don't necessarily want to be playing, an 11-gauge string tuned to E on a 27, 28-inch scale guitar. That would be a monster. That would add a lot of tension, and so, as you say, a lot of 7-string guitars will either be, I see a lot of 25.5-inch scale 7-strings, or 26 or 26.5, or they'll use fanned frets, pardon me, in order to have like a 27-inch scale on the low B and more like a typical 25-inch scale on the high E. So very different approach, I think, in that regard. You end up with a more harmonically rich low B on longer scale lengths, so baritones generally will give you a little bit more of that. You can even hear that in these two guitars, though it's a little hard.
Clean, maybe.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm missing that third relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and we'll get into that too when we talk about the playing relationship to them. But you can already hear there, I think, there is some more richness to this B, even at that half inch. And when you get to like a 30-inch scale, it'll be worlds different, right? So let's talk about the two different ways that these instruments sort of play. Because I think there's a lot to unpack here. So I'll go up first here. So the nice thing about a baritone guitar like this is, I mean, I can do anything that I would otherwise do on a regular electric guitar. I can do jazz comp. It's right there where I expect it. I can even, and this is one of my favorite things to do on a baritone, I can just play cowboy chords, and they kind of take on a whole different, less cliche sort of thing. I'll show you. You know, that's like the most cliche thing you can do on a guitar. And it sounds, to my ear at least, it sounds like something new.
Yeah.
A lot more than any standard, GDC thing is going to sound, which is something that I really love about a baritone guitar. You can do things that feel super cliche and overdone on a regular guitar and, get away with it. It adds something new. Of course, the big disadvantage of that is that, if I want to play like an E flat major 7 and I have to even think about, I'm all the way up here. Go way lower, of course, but to play a lot of those things that you would normally be playing, if you're playing with guys that are playing an E, if you're a bar chord player like me, you're way up there. On the other side, though, it does open up the chance, I like to do a lot of like a thumbed G chord, but I could never really play that all the way down at D. Which is pretty cool. I like that. It opens up this whole new region that was not available to me, but at some cost of the normal things being way higher up, and of course, in general, with baritone guitars, it's a little bit harder to play this like a solo instrument, because I've got pretty thick strings, all the way around. Yeah. So to me, I think that's the advantage and the disadvantage. I think these instruments are great, and I'm willing to take those disadvantages, but it's a little bit of a different kind of calculation on a regular 7-string. Would you speak to that in terms of what's good and what's bad?
So I think generally when you approach a 7-string, it feels a lot more like a new instrument than a baritone. Yeah. Because if you orient yourself, like a lot of guitarists do, around the low string, all of your chords are wrong. So if I play like a G shape with my low string being the bass, horrendous. But then I could also do things like add in try to add in those low notes and make that stuff a little different. But I think that is why most 7-string music kind of has its own personality.
Yeah, there's no playbook for integrating a low B into a standard guitar shape, basically.
Yeah, because even a lot of like Bucky Pizzarelli and George Van Apps, people who would have played jazz on 7-strings, usually tune down to an A, so that you would have that kind of parallel shape, and you could just grab that whenever you want to go to your 5th or something. It's there, but especially with like the design of these things and how they sound, it just doesn't really sound good to my ear. But then, if you want to do the metal thing, which a lot of these gravitate towards, they do it. They do it right away. And a lot of those kind of shapes, like parallel stuff, that is popular in kind of modern metal, are super easy, and you have a lot more places to do it. Which is pretty different than a baritone.
Yeah,
very
for
different
sure.
than a baritone.
For sure.
Yeah, and even playing like classic, like you just kind of get lost. I get lost.
Yeah, that doesn't work as well. I felt the studio rattle with that low E. Or that low B. See, I'm even calling it an E, and that's I think part of it. I wanted to say real quickly on your point, something that I find fascinating is that people that play baritones, you're usually B to B or A to A. I very rarely see people really mixing it up on a baritone, unless they're just taking the standard shape and moving it down. Whereas 7 strings, as we know, because we work with a lot of these players, it's really just a platform for whatever the heck tuning you want. I mean, it really does not seem like a vast majority of 7-string players play B, E, A, D, G, B, E. You know, at the very least, it's drop A is like almost a standard for most of those players. And I think that comes from what you're talking about. It's a new instrument in many ways, you know, that you can tune and do with what you want, but it's not really built for you to just be extending your guitar stuff down in most cases. Yeah,
and I think it's, you know, in maybe a silly comparison, but the difference between a guitar and a 6-string lute is that third between your G and B is between the center 2 strings, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
You know, so if that little bit makes it a completely different instrument, I feel that way about this, where you move the third relationship and add more strings. It kind of breaks away from being like what we know a guitar to be, which I think makes it a lot more exciting, because maybe that's why the past 10, 12 years of these extended range guitars kind of picking up momentum and being a little more than they were used in the 90s, which was just like they could have been a baritone, where they're actually utilizing the whole fretboard. It really has changed the sound of guitar and what people expect guitar to sound like.
It actually has always surprised me that you don't see more people that are playing 7 strings that are just abandoning the third relationship altogether and treating it more like a 6 or 7 string bass where you just have fourths all the way across. Because I think for a lot of metal purposes, you don't get a lot. You know, obviously we use that third so that you have the same string on the high and low, right? But you don't really, that's not really used too frequently in modern metal as far as I see it.
There's not too many big 6-string chords like that.
Yeah, so at some level I would almost think it'd be easier. I mean, because I do play a 6-string bass every so often, and it's lovely because the shapes just keep going. You know, you can run right up a scale and right back down a scale without thinking about it at all. Everything just moves in this beautiful diagonal pattern as you go up. So it surprises me I don't see more people just tune it in fourths in the first place, or go Robert Fripp style and go with the fifths, you know.
That's interesting.
So if you're at home and deciding between these two, you know you want to go lower and you're not sure which way to go, we thought we'd do just a really quick sort of pitch. So Andy, you can take first. Why should I consider going the 7-string route in order to get that low B?
Sure. If you're looking for an instrument that'll suggest new music, new styles of music, something a little more adventurous, then the 7-string offers a lot for you. And I think breaking free of the traditional 6-string tuning will allow you to experiment even more and maybe end up in like an expanded DAD or something like bands like Tesseract use, and just kind of find your own voice in music and on the guitar.
And that's a great pitch, and that really highlights what it is that's special about these instruments. And my pitch is basically the inverse of that, which is if you want an instrument that you can just pick up and just play. I mean, you don't have to think about it at all. You will the experience of playing a baritone guitar is grabbing this guitar, playing what you're used to, and thinking, oh, that sounds different than what I'm used to. Almost like playing something through a pedal. Baritone's a great guitar for you, and honestly, at a way lower entry point in terms of effort, you can have one of these hanging around and just pick it up for some added inspiration, or when you get bored from that typical E, you've got this hanging around so that you can play it. I think that either, though, truly would be a good fit, depending on what your mood is.
Yeah.
You know.
And the price for entry on a baritone, for a good baritone, I think is lower than a good 7-string.
Nonsense. I got that for $150 from Music Go Round, but you should maybe do a little bit better than this if you're looking for one. I paid per fret, actually. It's a 24 fret, so $6 a fret got me about there, right? That said, I hope this has been helpful if you're at home trying to decide between these two, or if you've never thought about getting one of these before. I think that there's really good value to having either one hanging around your studio as just another piece for inspiration, another way to extend what you're doing on the guitar. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Leave us a comment down below. Let us know if you were on Team Baritone or Team 7-string or Team E to E's fine and you're all a bunch of idiots. Anything is okay.